Friends, welcome to a somewhat overcast Beverly Hills, California, where it's a bit of a special day because it's not every day that we get a new car dropped on us, and it's definitely not every day that we get an entirely new segment dropped on us, and it's definitely not every day that Bentley enters a new segment. Now, if you haven't been living under a rock recently, you probably have heard that Bentley is going to bring out their own SUV. And there's been like spy shots, they had the EXP version, but now finally here in Los Angeles, California, or Beverly Hills, they have brought us the Bentayga. So why don't you and I spend some time walking around the car, go over some of the tech highlights, as well as some of the design. Now, of course, you and I are car guys, so we need to start with the engine. So let's come on over here, bring the hood up, which is aluminum, and then talk a little bit about the engine here. So if you are familiar with Bentley, and we've done a number of these episodes before, there is a W12. Now, this technically is a W12 engine, but it's a little bit different here for a couple reasons. Number one, it actually has more power than the Continental. It's 600 horsepower, and it's 664 pound-feet of torque. Let that roll around in your brain a little bit. 664 pound-feet of torque. Like, the only kind of cars that we've seen those numbers before are from some of those, like the V12 Mercedes, the S65 Coupe that we drove. And this is an SUV with that kind of power. Now, what's really interesting here is, okay, the horsepower, the peak comes in at about 5,500 RPM. But what's really cool about this engine is the torque. That 664 comes in at a stupidly low 1,310 RPM, and it stays flat all the way up to 5,500 RPM. Now, what's interesting here is, okay, this is a W12, and you've seen that Bentley has basically been doing this since, what, 2002, when the Continental first came out? But this is a different application here. This is an application that has to technically go off-road. Now, frankly, if I'm being honest, I don't know who the hell would take this thing off-road, but you can. There's probably going to be some people that are going to take this thing off-road. So the engines had to have been re-engineered to take on some of that duty. So, for example, think of the car going up on like 30-degree, 40-degree type hills. The engine's going to get starved of either fuel or oil. So there's a couple of things that are different here. It's not a side oiler. It's not like a dry sump system. It is a wet sump system, but what they're doing is they're taking the oil from a couple of different places, like it's actually plumbed from the wet sump a little differently, and then according to the people I spoke to here at Bentley, they scavenge some of the oil from the turbos. Very cool. Now, granted, it's very early in the process here to find out about this, so you and I have to come back to this. Let's put a pin in it and spend some more time once we get the car to drive and actually talk in more detail with some of the engineers. Let's put this down. Now let's talk about some of the design touches, some of the functional design touches. Now, do you guys remember when we had that purple Continental W12? That was what, like 3-4 years ago almost we had that car? You remember we talked with Mean Gene about this one panel here. So this panel is unique in that it's super formed aluminum, which means you don't have a guy over in England that's actually beating a panel of aluminum over a buck. This is actually a superform piece that's done effectively in a press, and it's unique. Basically, you can get a unique seam like, it's not actually, what am I saying, a seam. You can get a great crease like this from superform aluminum process, but unlike the Continental, most of the body panels are aluminum. So like the hood, the doors, the rear three-quarters, that's all aluminum, where the actual structure itself, so all of the cage, some of the intrusion bars, that kind of stuff, that's all steel and a combination of aluminum and steel, as well as some high-strength steel. Now, a couple of things that's interesting up here, not just superform aluminum in this crease here, but look at the headlight here. Come on in, Billy, let's show the audience this. Look at how it's like sandwiched here. You see the detail of the Bentley here. Now, what's interesting about this is there's actually no bumper that's here. So what this is, it basically goes straight down. This is the aluminum piece, and actually technically this is the bumper. But think about what they're doing here. They're actually having a curvature that's in the actual aluminum piece, and then they sandwich the two, basically the driving light and the headlight, together in this one section. Very neat little touch. Now, you guys know that I'm like a design freak at heart, kind of a frustrated designer, so to see stuff like this, just fantastic. And also, notice one of the details here. Remember the knurling that we've seen in like the Mulsanne or the Continental? You get the knurling repeated in this light fixture here. Very cool touch. And speaking of the light, obviously this isn't a light because it's body colored, but this is actually the cleaner for the headlight. So that pops out, but again, they repeat the knurling in here as well. Now come on back here, obviously you get the Flying B. We've seen this before in the Flying Spur. That's actually on the sedan car. Nice little touch here. I like how it's incorporated here. Let's kind of stand back and look at the car. You guys have seen this car as the EXP. You've seen it in God knows how many spy shots. You've seen it in Bentley marketing communications material. Now this is honestly, this is the first time I've laid eyes on this thing in person, and even I have to admit the design is significantly more successful in person, and that's a function of the proportions. Again, I've told you this before in God knows how many episodes, where you and I'm not going to tell you guys what you can see, so we'll come back to how you think about the design a little later in the episode. Now come on over here, Billy, let's talk about the interior. So there's a couple of details about the interior I want to show you guys. Remember we talked about the knurling up in the lights? So this vent is very similar to the vent you see on other Bentleys in the Mulsanne, in the Continental, but take a look at what they've done here. They've put the knurling on the inside of the bezel here. Very neat touch, and that's a Bentayga only thing. And then notice in here, the steering wheel is unique to Bentayga, but the rest of the interior, while it's unique to Bentayga, it's still, it smacks of a Bentley. But here's an interesting touch, actually two really interesting touches. Take a look at the speaker grills. It's the same type of system you would see in a Continental, but look at how they change the texture of the speaker grills. Granted, not as exciting as you see on, say, like the Burmesters and the Mercedes, but I kind of like the rugged touch of that. I'm gonna have to spend some more time getting to know this. I'll come back to you guys when I get more details on the audio. We really didn't get into that kind of granularity. But the other thing I want to point out is, obviously, it's a diamond-stitched interior here. This is a Bentley trademark, and frankly, this is kind of a trademark for most bespoke-built cars. But notice, take a look at the top of the seat here. Once again, this is something that you've seen in other Bentleys, but this is a unique pattern to the Bentayga. Kind of a neat touch there, how they've got the vented seats here. And the thing that they were going for, the guy I was talking to before, he was telling me they were going for like an outdoor jacket. You know, you see those, the diamond quilted jackets, like the hunting jackets. That's kind of what they were going for here. Now let's press on to the back. And I gotta be honest with you, I see like G8, G10, G12 liters in the back of these kind of cars. Is there a lot of legroom there? Not exactly. I wouldn't be surprised or shocked if we're going to see a long wheelbase version of this. But notice this is fitted with two individual buckets with a console. And then this thing here, we've seen this before. This comes out. It controls basically everything. Controls climate, controls audio, infotainment, navigation, and then notice you get the same kind of knurling in the vents repeated back here. And obviously, this is a Bentley, so you can still have this like these Oregon push-pull vents to turn the vents on and off. And this is, it's an SUV, so I don't care if it's a super expensive SUV or if it's a Kia. You're still going to have entertainment for the kids in the back. I guess that's part of the deal. You've got a panoramic sunroof. That's I think, prerequisite for this thing. And then check this thing out here. This, believe it or not, is an ashtray. In like 2015, you would think it's passé, but even this ashtray is something to behold. Like, you guys can't feel how heavy this thing, but this has got to be like 2 to 4 pounds, this ashtray, because it's literally like, I want to say, carved from one billet of aluminum. Like old school, like hot rodders made stuff like this. I would take this thing home just to have it because I think it's cool. Like, remember we talked about in that, what was it? Again, the purple Bentley episode, the story about the aluminum gas cap. If you haven't seen that episode or even just that one segment, you guys got to check it out. I'll put a link to that in this episode. Anyway, let's go back to the rear of the car and let's take a look at the rear three-quarters. Same kind of thing here, just kind of looking at it. The proportions, I don't think you get the proportions of this thing in pictures. Now, I'll be honest, do I think Bentley should be in the SUV market? From a car guy perspective, absolutely not. I think there should be a purity of luxury and sports cars, but look at how times have changed, where SUVs, we talked about this in our Porsche Cayenne Turbo S episode from Sweden, in that Porsche can't build enough of those things. They sell every one of them they make, and those aren't cheap. Those are up to $200,000 or more, depending on how you outfit them. So from a business perspective, I can see why Bentley would come out with something like this. Now, Bentley, come on back here. Take a look at the aluminum wheels. Now, the capabilities, I know they've talked about the capabilities of this thing off-road. You and we're not at a point where we can comment about that. We're gonna have to drive the car both on-road or off-road, come back to you with that. But with that, I want to spend some time just kind of walking around the car. I want you guys to kind of see what this thing looks like in person. Hopefully you'll have the opportunity, because auto show season is starting up. LA Auto Show, at least in the US, comes up in November, and then it's going to start making the tours around LA, Detroit, New York, all that kind of stuff. And I really want you guys to get out there and take a look at this thing, because I would love your insight on what do you think of this thing. And it's not a simple, do you like it or not? It's, what do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And what would you change? Let me know in the comments below or via our social media, Motoman TV all in word, Motoman TV all in word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And until we actually get to drive it, or actually, I haven't told you guys yet, back when this car was going through the last development pieces, as well as early production stages, we went over to England for a very special episode where we actually built a Bentley from start to finish, and you're going to be seeing not just one episode. That's the only thing I'm going to tell you about it. Stay tuned, because we have a very exciting announcement coming up in the next couple of weeks with a Bentley build, let's call it ARC for now. And with that, I'm going to say cheerio.